Hello there. Uh, this is Paul Glumaz once again. We're heading into the Christmas season, uh, and you're going to get an impeachment, articles of impeachment voting up for in your Christmas stocking. That's what you're going to get for Christmas, is an impeachment resolution that passes the House of Representatives. Maybe not. There's a lot of squirming Democrats right now that are like, what are we doing here? So this is being brought to you by General Welfare Presents. It's November 11th, and I want to start off by saying that something very spectacular has occurred, which is not being presented by the media as something very spectacular. I may be the only person in the world that thinks it's spectacular, but I'm going to share it with you. Now, among the Republican senators, next to John McCain, the biggest jerk is Lindsey Graham. He's been calling for bombing Iran to the Stone Age for the last, 20 years, 30 years, 15 years. I mean, what a jerk. And this guy does not like Donald Trump. He's been attacking Donald Trump. He was opposing Donald Trump. And he's kind of warmed up to Donald Trump, but then he's against Donald Trump, but then he's for Donald Trump. Now, if there's going to be a Senate Republican support for impeachment sufficient to remove the President of the United States, someone like Lindsey Graham is going to have to be playing a key role in that. He's the head of the Intelligence Committee. He's part of the establishment. Not like Trump. Trump's not part of the establishment. But Lindsey Graham is part of that establishment. And his close associate is Lindsey Graham. And he replaced, as the close associate to John McCain, he replaced the great asshole Joe Lieberman. So it was Lieberman and McCain that played the key role in stampeding the United States into the Iraq War, the very Iraq War that President Trump won his election by attacking. Okay, that's Lindsey Graham. Now you have to understand that what is spectacular was that Lindsey Graham went before the cameras on Tuesday or Monday, I think it was Tuesday, and had a press conference. I think it was Monday, and it was an 18-minute press conference where he was discussing the HOROWITZ report. And what he said is that while you can debate whether or not there were sufficient grounds for an investigation, which Horowitz's report says, but which Durham and Barr reject because they have a bigger overview. But what he says is that you can argue about that, but there's one thing you can't argue with, is that in the report it specifies very specific acts of criminality in the prosecution of the investigation. And one of those is one of the ones is that the subsource to Christopher Steele's dossier, when interviewed by the FBI, claimed that everything he had told Christopher Steele was all based on hearsay, barroom and so forth and so on. So nothing in that Steele report was substantiated. The FBI lied, or the lawyer doing this lied and said this subsource was truthful and could verify and back up what was in the Steele dossier, and therefore continue the investigation. That's a criminal act. And there are other criminal acts of that type in the report. So while the report does not exonerate the Justice Department or the FBI, what it does is it says that within the purview of the knowledge that the Inspector General was allowed to to examine, there appeared to be, at a very low bar, there appeared to be sufficient reasons to launch an investigation. Or as one lawyer said, it's like, getting approval, the captain of the Titanic getting approval to start the voyage, and then ramming the ship into the iceberg. It's the same thing. So this is very, very, very important. And then Chuck Schumer gets up on the same day in the same press area and does this whole conspiracy theory. The Horowitz report proves that everything is, the Trump administration is a bunch of crazy conspiracy people. See, there was not that, the Justice Department and the FBI is completely exonerated. Blah 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 blah. Did he have any of his aides read the report to tell him that the report actually starts the process of going after the FBI, that the actual process of dismantling the police state apparatus that he's trying to protect, that Schumer and the Democrats are trying to protect, and Obama and so forth, that this is the opening door for bringing down the entire police state apparatus that does surveillance, it does blackmail, it does frame-ups, it does assassinations, it runs terrorism. All these shootings, a lot of it is FBI informants and FBI provoked type situations. The situation in Pensacola, Florida, has FBI written all over it. So does the FBI cover-up of 9/11. All of that is in there. Okay? All of that is part of the institution. And on top of that, Nancy Pelosi, in answering a question at a university where she was speaking, reveals that she didn't pursue impeachment of Bush or Cheney because everyone knew, including her, because she was in the intelligence community on the intelligence committee. Everyone knew that from the intelligence that the U.S. had, that there were no weapons of mass destruction. She admits that. She knew. She knew the government was lying. She knew the Bush administration was lying. She knew Dick Cheney was lying. Oh, she didn't vote for the war, but she knew it was all a lie, the basis for the war, and she went along with that, and she admits it. And because everyone knew that it was a lie, she was saying, I'm not going to launch a hearing into the impeachment based on the lie, because why? Because everybody knew it was a lie. So that means everybody was implicated in the lie. I don't know what you want to call that. It's corruption. So she's saying that. So now they're saying, okay, we're going to impeach him on this. We're going to impeach him for going to court on it as obstruction of the Congress. I mean, that's crazy. You go to the courts on the issue, and that's an obstruction of justice, of the Congress. I mean, that's crazy. And people are out there watching this thing, and they're scratching their head. What the hell is this? And then Pelosi comes out and says, well, the real issue is Russia. Stopping Russian aggression. The real issue is Russia. And now they're trying to put this thing through the Congress where they're going to label Russia a terrorist state. They're going to label Russia a terrorist state. This is a state. This is a country that could nuke your ass 1,000,000 times over. They got these stealth weapons. They got, these special 20 times the speed of sound glider. They got these drone submarines laying off your coast. They got these missiles that can go around the world and hit you on the backside. The drones. And you're going to label them a terrorist state and accuse the people who are defending themselves against the Nazis in the Donbass terrorists? That's insane. That's what Pelosi and these people are doing. They're escalating. They're escalating. So what does this mean? What's going on? And then all these Democrats in these swing districts are going, hey, wait a second now. Wait a second now. The people in my district are not really with this policy. And then we talked to one of them from Detroit, a woman by the name of Dingell, whose father was a very prominent congressman, who I believe has passed away, or maybe has retired. And she tells us privately, look, they got these billionaires out there, like Steyer. And you got this billionaire Bloomberg, who's weighed into the campaign. And he's offering $10 million of his campaign money to presidential candidates and congressional candidates. Now, what does this mean? You got billionaires telling you better go for impeachment, or else I'm going to drop a load of money on whoever is going to run against you. Now, you either want my money and do this, or I'm going to put it with your opponent. Billionaires. This has become a huge factor in American politics. And most of these billionaires are part of the British Empire. Especially Sir Michael Bloomberg, former mayor of New York, billionaire. And he's collaborator with the head of the Bank of England in this massive attack on industrial development through cutting off credit to industry through this green finance initiative. Oh, you don't like the idea of shutting down industry in your neighborhood? Well, I got billions of dollars, and I'm gonna put some money against you. You don't want to mess with me. That's what's going on. Steyer, Soros, Bloomberg. And they have the Republican versions of it, the Koch brothers. Well, there's only one brother already died, but the same crowd. They didn't like Trump. Edelman. Well, he financed Trump. But, again, he's a billionaire. It's one of these billionaires. And this is what it's become. This is what politics is. That's what happened to the Roman Empire. The people who amassed the wealth based on the Roman legions looting all of Europe became the power. And they could buy senators and they could do whatever they want. And that's the situation we're in the United States right now. These people can buy people. But they're not going to be able to, but they don't have enough economic activity to buy the American people. The American people are getting screwed. Okay, and Tucker Carlson had this incredible spot a week ago, where he went after one of these billionaires, Paul Singer, the hedge fund billionaire, the vulture capitalist, who's raped all these third world countries by buying up their debt at a nickel or 2 cents on the dollar, and then going into court and seizing their ships and seizing their assets outside of their country, forcing them to pay and making this huge profit. Well, he did that to Cabela as an example. He went through the whole thing with Cabela that was based out of a place called Sydney, Colorado, forced a layoff of 2,000 people, sold the thing got a controlling share, forced it to merge with Bass, and then the stock went up and then made a huge profit and then stripped it and so forth and so on, and made a huge profit. 2,000 people were out of work. So Tucker Carlson was showing this. And this is how America was destroyed. Well, what was destroyed? Well, San Francisco and Seattle and the East Coast and the West Coast, they have this financialization. They have the IT. They have the processing of information. Amazon is an example. Google, Microsoft, all these examples. But these things are not the heart of the productive apparatus. They're part of the global system of information and control of information and surveillance. The huge industry is, Amazon is involved in providing the computer power for the CIA to store vast amounts of information based on surveillance. That's the major industry. Surveillance. Yeah, sure, you got an app on your phone and maybe it'll take you an hour and a half instead of 2 hours to get, 20 miles on the freeway. Well, that's great. But you ain't going to get a new freeway, and you're not going to get an efficient, in-time mass transit system, that's for sure. The infrastructure is not being developed. But you have these high-rises going up in Seattle like nobody's business, as if the tech boom is going to be forever. So what does this mean? It means that the financing is not in the real economy. It's not in the physical economy. So while Tucker didn't go through that, and Tucker did not go through how you would resolve it, he's demonstrating in this situation the actual way that the country was stripped. So you have the so-called prosperity, which isn't going to last, along the coast, but then the whole interior of the United States, all these small towns, they used to be productive. The main institutions there is the methadone clinic and the thrift store. That's what you got. That's Main Street America. Methadone clinics, and or whatever of that type, and thrift stores, because you can't afford to buy anything, and even in Walmart's too expensive. So that's what you're dealing with. And those people are not going to buy into this whole charade. They've been hearing charades for a very long period of time, and they see in Donald Trump somebody who's is fighting this. So then why is this if this impeachment thing is going into a total clown show or disaster show, why are they pursuing it, and why are they doubling down and doubling down, doubling down? Because the British Empire runs these billionaires, runs this whole system. They have an embedded structure in the United States going back to J. Edgar Hoover as far as the Justice Department, going back to before FDR as far as the State Department goes. Kissinger admitted that he kept the British Foreign Office more informed of the doings of the State Department than he did the U.S. President. Why bother go to the U.S. President? Why don't you talk to the British Foreign Office? Let them in on what you're doing, because they're the ones actually that are working with you, that are embedded with you. They're the ones talking to you about what you need to do. What, you're going to go to the president and talk to the president about foreign policy? That doesn't make any sense. No, you're going to talk to the British Foreign Office first, then you're going to figure out what the policy should be, and then you're going to go tell the president, say, this is the policy you should follow. And that's essentially what you heard when Bill Taylor and George Kent from the State Department was explaining that Trump was violating 70 years of foreign policy, foreign policy of the United States. Yeah, he's violating 70 years of foreign policy, British foreign policy, put upon the United States. He's violating it. So for that reason, he needs to go. That's what they said. They didn't say British. But when George Kent waxed eloquently about Kissinger and Brzezinski being his idols, and how the Nazis in the Ukraine were really freedom fighters like our Minutemen, I mean, you know that the Kool-Aid that these people drink, you know, was in their milk bottles long before they even knew they were going to be in the State Department. So that's essentially what you're dealing with. You know, like the Dulles brothers, and then the Kissinger, and then George Shultz, and then, you know, it's like a continuum. All the people that went through that process think the same way. Madeleine Albright, absolutely. What's her name? The Bush woman, the Bush State
Condoleezza.
Condoleezza Rice, the same thing. They all come from the same you know, genealogical State Department British orientation, with the different shades of this and that. And John Kerry, same thing. I mean, he was in the Skull and Bones, and he's an aristocrat. You know, his family were aristocrats. You know, basically semi-aristocrats. You know, and he and his wife believe the world's too overpopulated, and something needs to be done dramatically soon. So anyhow, this is what you're dealing with. So how does Donald Trump going to conduct foreign policy? Is he going to conduct it to the State Department? Who in the State Department is going to work with Donald Trump and actually not try to use the opportunity to screw him up? Who in the you know, the National Security Council he's going to work with? They're all the same, except for Pompeo. He's not the same. He's a radical, evangelical, end times guy. Well, that's not exactly the same thing, but it's got its issues. That's got its issues. Pompeo has its issues. He's not on the same team as as Donald Trump, but he's also way to the weird, or way off the scale for the British policy people. So that's a little kind of strange. But how does Trump do foreign policy? Well, his biographer, who just read an official biography that was published, who's now getting death threats for writing an official biography. An official biography means that the president allowed you to interview all the people, and that the biography is basically what you know, is directly based upon the actual interviews. What he says is that it's the Trump kids who are playing the major role of being trusted emissaries between governments. Jared, Ivanka, Eric, Donald Jr., and maybe some of the other in-laws. They're playing the role of being the honest brokers between the United States and some of these foreign countries, because you cannot trust somebody from the State Department. That's how bad it is. The United States has two governments. One is the existing bureaucracy, and the other is Donald Trump. And they are at war. And this impeachment process allows for a continued insurrection within the bureaucracy, a continued insurrection within the courts, a continued insurrection within the Democratic caucus of the Senate and the House of Representatives. Because this is not the loyal opposition where you disagree with the president and you have a dialogue with the president, or you vote for or against. No, this is an insurrection. It is a coup. And the impeachment process is just one small part of the whole coup. It involves the Hong Kong riots. It involves putting sanctions on all these countries that Trump is trying to have a discussion with. It involves the attacks on China. It involves the attacks on Russia, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's all connected to box Trump in. And this takes us back to the Lord's report that was put out a few years ago after Trump was elected, or a year and a half or 2 years ago. And this is the British House of Lords, and the British House of Lords wrote a report on British foreign policy for the future. And the British Lords report says there's two problems facing the British Foreign Office. And the British Foreign Office is the most sophisticated operation on the planet. They have their tentacles in every part of the world, within every government, with the help of British intelligence, with the help of the financial side of British intelligence and the Foreign Office. Christopher Steele was running the Russia desk, and then he graduated to the private sector, and he was working tandem with Victoria Nuland in this entire Ukraine thing as a prelude to doing the same thing in Russia, color revolution in Russia. He was the one who created the false information on the Litvinenko affair. He ran that and ran the propaganda operation back in the started in the 2005, 2004, 2005 against laying the groundwork for the confrontation with Russia. And then he becomes head of this intelligence, private intelligence, which gets $200 million a year revenue from private intelligence, which is still part of the British intelligence. And then he's involved with the DNC. He's involved with everybody. He's passing the reports. He's doing all of this. He's running the whole show to set up the whole thing, and with the FBI and the Justice Department and so forth and so on. He's playing all the roles. That is the way the British operate. And they operate in this way. They understand what they're doing. So in this situation, you have everything being done. This is an insurrection. This is an attempted coup. And the coup comes when Trump makes a mistake. Like he starts to bomb Iran. That's a mistake. That'll get him, that'll lose his support. 40% of U.S. military personnel believe that Russia is an ally, not an enemy. So this is what's going on. And what does Trump do in response? He has a meeting with Lavrov on beginning the process of dealing with nuclear weapons. Exactly the opposite. So this is getting very interesting. So stay tuned for our next episode.